Noticing that the first batch of processed coal was finished and ready for the oven, Claire walked over to the control system on one of the walls. Instead of having to manually dump the coal into the oven, the process had become several times easier and only required her to control a crane system attached to the ceiling. Tapping on the screen that controlled many of the functions on this side of the workshop, the only thing needed was to press the button for depositing the coals. Attached to a rail system on the ceiling, the crane moved to a position right above the large cart filled to the brim with coal. Flashing lights warned that the crane was moving to prevent anyone from getting injured. Electromagnets slammed onto the side of the cart and began lifting it up, a quiet whirring sound being heard from the motors at the top. Claire watched as the cart was up near the ceiling. "We should put up tape to prevent people from being under that thing as it moves around," Hannah suggested as she also stared at the machine carrying the cart of coal over to the oven. Tracking the route it was going, Claire saw that there were only a few places that could be dangerous. She nodded at the idea. "The last thing we need is our workers getting injured while they're working here," Claire thought to herself. "We should make sure to make a list of things we need to get at the store before we start actively recruiting people," Claire suggested to Hannah. Hannah walked over to one of the screens that were playing a stream. She pressed the help button and was greeted by Darlena. "Hello, Hannah. Is there something you need?" Darlena asked. "Would it be possible if you could send us tape so we can mark the areas where our apprentices shouldn't work?" Hannah asked the robot. Smiling, Darlena said, "I'll make sure to send some over. I'll deduct it from the workshop's account. Will there be anything else you'll need?" Hannah shook her head. "We'll reach out if we need anything else." After the screen returned to the stream, Hannah looked back at Claire and grinned smugly. "I guess that was always an option, if you disliked the idea of walking for a bit." Claire grumbled unhappily, having her friend find an easier method instantly. Hannah giggled. "Claire, you need to get used to the conveniences of technology. Our time is better spent either on the other side or in here." She pointed to where they were standing. Claire turned around to look at the cart in the process of dumping out the coal into one of the sections of the oven. The hatch slowly closed and the cart made its journey back to the coal processing machine. She tried to ignore the feeling of Hannah smiling smugly at her. Making her way back to the coal, Claire grabbed the shovel and began putting more into a container. "What do you want to do after we fill up the oven?" Hannah asked, politely ignoring her friend's moody expression. "It'll be a while for us before everything is done, and the best part is the system will handle the unloading of the coke. Honestly, we should have just had Darlena made it so that this entire part was also automated." Shoveling another batch of coal, Claire said, "But then it won't give the people working on this side much opportunity to train their endurance. I figured this part and the making of the throwing daggers will give them enough to do, aside from checking to make sure that the iron and steel are coming out properly." After filling up the container, she moved it slightly out of the way in order to place a new one in front of her. "Since it'll be a while, why don't we head back into the other side?" Hannah looked over to the streams. "You thinking of contacting your sisters?" "Probably should. Even though it hasn't been that long since we've seen them, I suspect that they'll want to join in." Claire stood up and stretched. She looked at the oven. At least we don't have to worry about whether the coal is finished being made into coke. Our new setup will automatically store it into one of these. She slapped a hand on the container that held a large batch of coals.